Hi, my name is Greg Canty, and I'd like to welcome you to the Win Happy podcast. I love chatting to people from all walks of life about their lives and their careers, about the choices they make along the way to pursue their happiness, and what winning actually means to them. I hope you enjoy these conversations as much as I do. Thanks for listening. On today's podcast, I chat with Sally Smart, who runs Smart Productions in Schull in West Cork. I can honestly say that Sally is one of the most fascinating people that I have ever met. In part one of this two-part podcast, Sally talks about her early life in Cornwall, running away to Australia, living on a deserted island by herself for 9 months, and falling in love with Gus, an Aboriginal man, and living together in a station wagon with their 2 children. Let's hear from Sally. Sally Smart, a huge welcome to the Win Happy podcast. How are you doing?
Thank you. Good. Yeah, really well.
So we're located in the most unusual building. Now, obviously, the listeners can't see what I see. Can you describe the room that we're in?
Well, to me, it's really beautiful. I mean, other people come in and think it looks like a bomb went off in a art and crafts factory, but
10 bombs, I would say.
10 bombs, yeah. Well, at the moment it's in the middle of a summer camp with kids doing all kinds of stuff, so it's messy. But yeah, it's a really beautiful creative space that I made. It used to be the old hardware shop, then it was studios and stuff, but it was all full of rubbish, and so I kind of reclaimed it and reclaimed the lovely wooden floor. And it was always kind of been my dream to get my hands on somewhere that I could consolidate all my skills and all that I have to offer, I think. So when I got this building, it was like finally, because up until I've been teaching in schools and like village halls, and you're just dragging tons of stuff everywhere with you to facilitate them being able to have the amount of freedom they have here. You'd have to take like an articulated lorry for the stuff. You can't leave anything set up. You can't have projects ongoing. So this was like my dream to get this space. And we were only supposed to have the top half of it, and then we got the bottom half too. So then it was like, I can build a stage and make a theatre. So it just all evolved, really. Like I started off with, I was doing this big show called the Tumbleweed Company with I think it was about 80 people in it, kids, teenagers, adults. And and then I thought, we have to build a stage. We need this, we need that. So it kind of just evolved out of this show that I built the whole downstairs, and since then it's just been a little theatre. So the people that so what they're learning, they can then consolidate by actually using those skills. So a lot of it came. I mean, it's all come from my passion for teaching kids, really. And education, like I educated my own children up until, my eldest was 14, and I just always felt, why would you have children if you don't then be responsible for what goes into them? So that was always my mission. So I gave up my career, I suppose, because I was a single mum at that point, and focused on my kids. And then through that came all the things I do. I mean, I trained as an actor, I've trained as an artist, I've got a lot of, I do a lot of therapy stuff, I've got, like I am a counsellor, a homeopath, but all of it always seems to come back to the well-being and development of kids and teenagers especially. I get on so well with and really love, and also my own children, and getting them on their paths and supporting them in what they really wanted to do, as opposed to go, no, don't do that, you'll never earn any money, go and do this instead, kind of thing. So Iola especially, I took her to Cork. I mean, everything was in Cork. There was nothing in West Cork, 30 years ago and 25 years ago, there was absolutely, so I was constantly driving up to Cork for her to do this theatre thing, or being in a dance group, So then I just started to think, I need a building. I mean, my dream really was to have a homestead that had like a retreat place, I suppose, that was creativity, music and art all coming together. because you tend to have one or the other. And so I've always wanted to bring all those elements together. And yes, I feel like I've finally managed it in this building, but there is a kind of sword hanging over it because it's now on the market for sale. So that's like being me really looking, oh wow, what's going to happen if I don't have this space anymore? Yeah. But anyway, well, I'm just being super hopeful, really. Yeah, I'm visualising it will never sell.
Yeah.
And I'll be here forever. But
in a way, it tells you something about the role of properties in a town.
Yeah.
And obviously you've got retail and in Schull itself you've got the library and we have loads of pubs.
Loads of pubs, yeah.
And, nice fashion shops and tourist shops and everything else and gift shops. But it's a big premises here and it's performing a really, really important role, which is teaching. And it's away from a school. It probably has to be away from a school as well, doesn't it?
Massively. Like, I actually ban adults from this building most of the time. Like, I don't want, like the parents offer to help and it's lovely they do, but I don't want them particularly to be in here because then I'm with the kids in their space, it's their space, and that's how we kind of roll with it, But when adults come in, then they've got different ideas. Oh, well, this, or we shouldn't do it that way. I mean, most of them are like, oh, why isn't it cleaner? Or why isn't it this or that or the other? Like, go away.
Yeah.
Because, you watch the kids shut down. The minute there's anything remotely schooly, it's, So they have really like I facilitate them writing their own stories. We write our own film scripts. We write our own animation scripts. And I script them with the dialogue, but the stories come from them, and before we create the stories, there's massive discussions, we'll all be making things and talking about, but what about, so we're talking about the world and history and what's going on the planet and how they all feel, and also their personal development stuff. It's mighty what they get from just doing drama. They don't realise they're doing therapy on any level, but they so are, so.
You have a very unique relationship with them.
I do, and I treasure that more than anything. And I think the reason that I do this endless amount of voluntary stuff and projects, and I go mad, because I'm super creative, but also there's nobody else doing it. There's nobody else. They don't have that freedom. They're not allowed to make a mess at home. They're not allowed to paint. School art is really dull.
Yeah, they can't run wild in the fields the way we used to.
Exactly, but so I suppose the children that come through here, and I mean, I've got kids that came when they were 5 and they're now in college. So that's how long I've been, and they're in good colleges doing acting and animation and film, so that to me feels like there is a real huge reward for all the effort, because loads of times, I mean, including my kids, it's like, why don't you get a proper job, Mum? And I'm like, but I'm doing what I love, absolutely. And to me, that's mighty when I see kids get off and they're actually, including my own children, and, all the effort and time put in there, and then actually they're doing what they love too and seeing the value of that. Because it's easy to get scared when you're a teenager. They get bombarded at school with achieve, and what are you going to do, and how are you going to earn the money, and money. So there is no facility for creatives in the community so much. There's, you're either a musician or you're an artist, but that's not really till you're older. There's no, so I get a lot of the creative kids obviously come through here. They're not interested in sports or GAA. They want to develop creative skills. And the marginalised kids and the kids with learning differences, and, they all come through here because so I feel like this space should be saved for the community. The community should buy this space. I mean, it's ludicrous. It's going to just be knocked down. That's probably what will happen to it. It's considered a site. That shed, the yard, the Blue House Gallery, they want to sell it all as one thing. And which I can understand that totally, but they see it as a site, so this will probably just get bulldozed.
Yeah.
And I find that astonishing, because it's just, God, what are the children meant to do?
Well, maybe we'll explain to them exactly how valuable it is.
I think that the parents and the kids that come here absolutely know that. They super appreciate it. As far as the rest of the community goes, I'm not sure. I don't think a lot of them have ever been in here. I don't know, obviously people know what I sort of get up to, but it's not even really about that. It's about developers and money and And there has been a lot of fuss about the courtyard and what's happened to that, so people are aware that they don't want developers to just come in and develop things and go away again, because they're not actually even living here, are they? They're just making a bit of money and moving on to the next project.
Yeah. At the same time, I think we have a responsibility to explain to people how valuable it is and the role it does play in the community and the difference. And maybe they just don't necessarily get that. Where are you from?
Cornwall, Foy. I was born in Foy. Grew up in Cornwall. Really love it, but
is that in the town or was it in the country?
No, in the country. We lived on my mum bought a small holding when I was probably about 3 or 4, I think, which was like her dream. So then we were self-sufficient, really. We had our own goats and we grew all our own food, and so it was like a work childhood because there was 5 girls, and so we all ended up like being like boys, which is actually great because I'm super capable.
Was she a country girl?
No, she worked for the Ministry of Agriculture. She wasn't a country girl. She was evacuated from London in the war to the country, but and then she went on to do agriculture with the ministry. So then she got a job in Cornwall as a dairy husbandry advisor. So they moved from where they were down to Cornwall, and I was born in Cornwall.
So you were running wild in the fields, were you?
So we were absolutely feral, to be fair, like looking back, because she had a full-time job.
Yeah.
And my dad had mental issues and wasn't, he wasn't particularly, he was definitely not the money earner anyway. So she was the breadwinner and we were wild. We just went out the door at the beginning of the day and came back covered in mud. Whenever we did. Well, I mean, there was, having said that, she did give us a lot of, she taught us, to read. She taught us all about literature. We never had a TV. We never had screens. It was a real old-fashioned, proper, healthy upbringing. But looking back, I think, God, I would never have let my kids do that. But then the world has really changed, hasn't it? It's not really safe anymore. So.
What did she work at, your mum?
My mum, she was a dairy husbandry advisor for the Ministry of Agriculture.
Okay.
Which is, somebody who goes around inspecting all the farms. I mean, she had the job of kind of dragging all the moorland farms up to spec. There were farmers, the stories I could tell you about that. So that was her career, really, her career job. My father was a zoologist. And also worked for the Ministry of Agriculture. That's how they met. And our house was a bit like Dr. Doolittle's. Like, you never knew what was going to be there when you came home. Like, you come home and there'd be 30 parrots in the pantry, and he bred goats and he bred all kinds of animals. So from that point of view, it's kind of amazing. We were allowed to have animals and we were allowed to see how they bred. At one point we had 200 guinea pigs that weren't in cages. They lived on the farmyard and they all had little places they went, and then it was rabbits, which my mother went insane about because they ate the garden and destroyed everything. But we were given freedom, to explore all that stuff. And I mean, a lot of it was because they were just too busy, but also, I look back on that and think that was really great.
What were the conversations around the kitchen table?
At home, quite strange, really. My father was like a real disciplinarian. Like, he was a Coldstream Guard before. He never wanted to be in the army. He was forced into the army by his father, who was like a brute. He always wanted to just be a vet. So he was just a mad mixture. Like, he was bipolar, which was called manic depression in them days. So you also never knew what was going to happen next. He was not mentally well. I definitely suffered a lot of abuse as a child.
So the whole house was on tender hooks the whole time, was it?
Some of the time. Other times he was high as a kite and happy, and we were all happy and it was all wonderful. And other times they'd be like quadraphonic classical music shaking the house, and he'd be closeted in a room somewhere, or we'd all be being thrashed for something we didn't understand, or, it was kind of nuts.
Yeah.
But in amongst all that was all the good, it was the good stuff too, which was the fact that I can build a barn, I can re-roof a house, I can cement render, I can stone wall build, I can...
Well, that's a lot of things that I can't do.
Exactly. And kids come in here, 14-year-olds, have never used a screwdriver. I'm shocked at the lack of ability, physical, capable, practical skills that kids have.
I'd say the truth that the parents probably don't have it either.
Took over. Exactly. Or they're coming from a different upbringing. But I am grateful for my capabilities, I think.
And tell me your own modus operandi. Was it to get out of there into the big bad world as soon as possible, or?
I was just obsessed with art and making and film. I did film at college. That was my whole world. And I went to Brighton University to do all that. And then I just started to get this longing to get out of civilization, to get out of institutions. Like, the college I went to was appalling. It was patriarchal. You paint brown pictures with lots of oil paint and discuss why you did it kind of art, It was like back in the day.
And saying that to the young girl who was running wild on the farm might be... But
I was doing really personal work and very, very personal work. Not even me. I didn't even understand myself what a lot of it was about, and they were all male teachers, and it was all like, oh, what's this about and what's that about? And, so I actually brought the college to its knees in the end because they would try to throw me out of my course. And because I wasn't painting. Because according to them, photography and all the things I was doing wasn't art. They wanted me to build 8-foot stretchers and cover them in brown oil paint and then explain why I'd done them,
Yeah.
Which some people were really good at, but I just thought, this is all complete nonsense. I don't understand what they were talking about. They were bullies, they were horrible. I mean, there was the whole, most of the male staff slept with the first year girls if they were willing.
Oh, lovely.
And that's how they got through to their first degrees, I wasn't doing any of that, and so I was kind of told I had to go away. And then somebody came into my studio who'd listened to this tutorial, which was basically 9 blokes haranguing me. And he said, you don't have to take that, go to the student union. So I went to the student union and they said, oh yeah, they do that every year. So their solution was we'd have a work-in. So we shut the college down and we locked everybody out and we worked. Everybody did art for 20. It was really fantastic, actually. And they got into the offices and got all the stuff out, all the hidden stuff, like the reason there were no women tutors, even though women tutors applied. Because I was only saying, could I have a woman tutor? Could we have some women on this staff? So that all actually came about in the end. They opened a whole multimedia course and with women staff, and I stayed because they got me a woman tutor, and then I got my degree. So it was all like a massive battle, which I never really intended. It just kind of happened, but looking back, I think, oh, that was good. Glad I did that.
So that fighter in you, where did that come from?
I think just the belief in what I was doing. If you're an artist and you're making something, you have this incredible sense of excitement when it's going well. And you just know what you're doing is important and it's flowing and it's something, and they just came in and just hacked it all to pieces, and I didn't even understand their terminology. Like the head of department, he was like, art is like a mistress. You've got to take her home and rough her up and get some paint on it. Where's the paint? This is how they talk to you. And you're like, I was only like 18 or something. I was like, oh my God, what are they talking about? But in me somewhere, I knew that they were wrong, and what I was doing was important, and so I think that's what pushed me on to stand by myself a bit, because I could easily have been the doormat and gone the other way,
And coming out of that college with your degree?
Coming out of that college with that degree, I got on the first plane to Australia and went and lived in the bush for 5 years.
Did you?
Yeah.
What in the name of God brought you there?
Well, weirdly enough, National Geographics we had when we were kids that were all like hand tinted, because that's how old I am. And I used to just stare at these pictures of Australia and parrots, the thought of parrots flying about in the trees. And I just thought, I want to go to Australia. It was just this deep thing in me. I couldn't explain it to you, to anybody even now. You know, I just had to go there. And so I sold this big, huge piece of stained glass that I'd made for part of my degree show. It was like 8 foot by 6 foot. See, this is the trouble with me. I start a little idea and then it just gets bigger and bigger and more complicated. So
but is that really a problem? You said that's the problem.
Oh, well,
it's probably isn't a problem.
Well, according to my children, it's possibly a problem. Like, do one small thing, Mum, and do it really well, you know. But I'm like, no, it's got to be 8 foot by 6 foot. So I had to learn to arc weld, and, you know, it all became about steel and structure as well as the glass work. And anyways, so I sold that and I got a ticket to Australia. And my friend was going to come with me, and at the last minute she bailed. And so I ended up landing in Australia on my own with no money and just this desire to meet Aborigines and live in the middle of nowhere and get away from white culture, really. That was...
Do you remember, walking down the steps of the plane? That first day?
Thinking, oh my God, what have I done?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was scary. And also, people kept saying, oh, where are you going in Australia? And I was like, well, I don't know. And they were like, well, it's a big place. I'm like, well, I'm just going to travel and see. And that's kind of what I did. I got out of Melbourne and I walked through this area where there were all farms, and I got a job picking carrots. And it just all kind of went from there, really. I saved up for a station wagon, and then I got in it, and then I set off on this journey around Australia. Carrot
picking wasn't a career forever, but no.
Well, it's seasonal there, so you work that job, and then you move and work the next thing, and, so I just got work in between.
That's good.
So I just called into farms when I needed some money, really. But the car that I bought it was like God was looking after me, really.
Maybe he was.
I went into this garage and I said to them, this is a local garage, and you wouldn't believe this because I'll tell you something else about it. Remind me about this garage in a minute. I walked into the garage and said, look, I want a station wagon. They had these beautiful Holden station wagons in Australia. They were built like tanks with leather bench seats and column shift gears. And 3 weeks later, I called back in. He said, oh, I've got your car out the back. And there was this gloriously beautiful Holden station wagon. He filled it up with petrol for me, and I drove away. And that was it, really. And then I was on this journey for...
What colour was it?
It was a pale, that sort of colour.
Oh, yeah, like
with
pale
white trims,
blue.
Pale greeny blues with white trims and leather seats. And
you were happy out, driving out of that garage.
And I thought I wanted this friend to come, and I wasn't, it was all going to be really hard without her, and what would I do? And then actually I drove out of Rosebud, this little town, with this car. And I just had this incredible sense of freedom, like, oh my God, I don't have to discuss where to go with anyone. I think a lot of my desires have always been about freedom and the need for freedom in my life. And even having her with me now, looking back, I think, oh, I'm so glad that didn't happen. She would have wanted to do things a certain way, and I wanted to live in the bush, like literally. I wanted to understand what the dream time was. I wanted to meet Aborigine people. I didn't want to stay in hotels and rooms, and so I just literally lived on the ground outside and got on it, got on with it. Like.
So was it literally this blonde woman from Cornwall pulling up on her pale blue station wagon? And
yes.
Yeah, I'm here.
Yeah.
How are you doing, lads?
Yeah. Well, that was the dodgy bit about being on your own there. That I learned the hard way. I got robbed. I got really done over a couple of times, and then after that, I learned to not be so open and share everything with everybody. I was just so naive, So when I had work, I was very careful not to tell people that I was camping in the bush or that I was wherever They were constantly trying to find out. It's all blokes, and they're all like, oh, where are you staying? So I'd always try to disappear out of at the end of the day, and for nobody really to know where I was. And I was lucky, yeah. I mean, the police were horrendous.
Were they?
Yeah, horrible. My God, what's a young Sheila like you doing on your own? They were bullies, they were racist. Oh, yeah, anyway, don't get me started on all that. But somehow I managed. I did have a couple of horrible things that went on, but I mostly managed to avoid anything too awful. Mostly because all I wanted to do was be in the absolute wilderness on my own. I lived on an island for 9 months. I just got to this island. Someone told me, you should go to Morton Island. And so I did. I got on this old fishing boat and with a load of fishermen that were going out there and just lived on this island for 9 months, catching fish to eat. And, I didn't have any supplies. There was no shops. There's nobody else lived on this island. But it was like 60 miles long. And there were like herds of wild brumbies that would just gallop along the beach and sacred Aborigine sites. And it was just incredible,
So in a way, that was nearly going back to your childhood.
Yeah, in a really wholesome way. And connecting with the earth and with nature and with, what Aborigines call the dream time, which is like, you can't, it's not a mental experience. You have to be in it. You have to be part of it. Like I remember now looking back, there were months went by when I had no awareness of me. I was just in the landscape, like mostly I was just working out how to catch a fish, or I spent weeks trying to catch this one prawn in this little creek that was like this giant prawn. I never caught it.
Did you go hungry a lot, did you?
No, actually. I was so fit and so skinny and so, you'd be amazed how little you need to live. I had a bag of rice, I'd have a few mouthfuls of rice, a bit of fish, and that, I was never hungry really. And I think also I've got a mechanism even now that I can switch off hunger. I can switch off needs really easily. I think, okay, I don't need that. I haven't got any of that right now, so I can't have it, so I won't think about it. And I don't know.
What made you move on?
Weirdly, there I am, picture it, the desert island. I'm living under this beautiful she oak on a little sandy hill, and I walk down to the sea, which is like turquoise with dolphins in it, and I make one little track down the sand, and I come back on the same track because I can't bear to mess it up. And one day there's this ungodly racket, and this giant double propellered helicopter lands on my beach, and out the back of it came like 80, 90 men, fridges, freezers, volleyball stuff, diving equipment. Oh my God, I just hid watching this all happen. And it was the Navy had come on a survival course with deep freezers and fridges and crates of beer and crates. I mean, you wouldn't believe it. It was really ridiculous. And so then everywhere I went, there were just men spying on me, following me about. So I thought, oh, this is crazy. I've just got to leave. Their boss, or whatever they call them, came and spoke to me. He said, oh, we'll make sure nobody bothers you. And I was thinking, oh, yeah, whatever. And that was it, really. It was just, the spell was gone. He said, oh, what do you think? It's great. We're all on a survival course.
Yeah, you could have taught them a few lessons.
I've been living here for 9 months with nothing. You've got 3 refrigerators there. So that was the end of that. And weirdly enough, I left Morton Island and I got this other thing in my head that I had to go to Stanthorpe. So I went to this place called Stanthorpe where someone had said there was work, and that's where I met the love of my life.
Oh.
And had some kids.
Very good.
He was Aborigine, half Aborigine. It was all like literally love at first sight. I literally drove past these 3 guys beside the road, and I saw him, and I was so like, oh, God, who's that? And they were standing by the road, and apparently he said, "A stupid cow, didn't she see we've run out of petrol?" Which you do if you're living in the bush, you always stop. But I was just so dazzled, I just kept going. And they ended up turning up at this little place I'd gone to look for work. So that was kind of, it was kind of really meant to be.
What was his name?
Gus.
Gus.
Yeah. And he's the dad of my first 2 girls.
Okay.
So then we did a lot of travelling in the interior together, and I've never met anyone who wants to live like that, except for me. You know, it's hard now for kids because there's phones and you're all connected, and you're never on your own, and even if you're in thousands of miles from anywhere. Whereas in them days, you know, I'd write to my mum, she'd get it a month later. You know, who knew where I was really, like. So that was that period of my life.
Did you enjoy that? Family life and all that kind of thing? Is that what you had wanted?
I didn't know I wanted that, but then I met this person, and then it was all about that, really. But it wasn't about settling down and having children. It was about travelling, you know. I felt like I'd done a lot of round Australia, but I'd never gone across the deserts and, you know, really into the interior. And he knew how to do, you know, he did all that. He was amazing like that. Plus, he could mend the car if it broke, and you know, luckily
handy fella to have around the place.
But you know, it was more just finding your soulmate and somebody who you can actually live how you want to live, and they accepting of that too, you know, and that's how they live. So it's it was great. I mean, I've never seen anybody. He would say, "Come on, we'll go get some water," and I'm really, you know, we're literally in the middle of the desert. Where? And he would just walk, and then he'd sit down and he'd start digging. And there'd be water, and I'd say, "How did you know it was there?" And he'd say, "Oh, you know, just..." He'd never explain it. It was just there. There's the water, you know. Or he'd say, oh, don't go there, there's a python. Or, you know, like, and you'd look under a giant big rock, and there'd be this massive coil of a python rolled up there, you know. For me, that was the nearest I got to the dream time then. It was really being with him and understanding much deeper how to be on the earth, how to not leave a mess, how to leave no trace, how to actually be able to survive, and, you know.
Explain dream time to me.
Well, the dream time is literally what the Aborigines called life. It's life. It's life, but life connected completely to nature. You never take more than you need. You never waste. But it's really hard to explain it. It's a state of being. It's like you're living as part of a bigger thing. It's not like me here, or what do I need? Oh, I need a cup of coffee, or I need this, I need that. You don't have any of that. It's more about experiencing, really. It's about living a life when what you're actually doing is experiencing. You know, the most of the doing that you do is collecting food or thinking about, food.
Yeah.
That's it, really. Food and water. And being. It's a very simplistic way to explain it, but that's kind of how it felt to me. Like,
were you working along the way?
I started a clothes label when I was there, weirdly enough. It didn't start as a clothes label then, but because I'm always madly creative, I was always making. So I started making a lot of shamanic things. And the reason for that was because everywhere I looked, there were birds, like parrots, crashed on the road, you know. So I would always, like Gus taught me that, like you always take kangaroos off the road. You just, you know, because they mate for life. So the kangaroo's there, the one's been killed, the other one just stands there grieving until it gets run over as well, because road trains just come through and they go through herds of cattle. It's incredible. Like I had to kill a cow with him once with a very small knife just to put it out of his misery, you know. So, and those were things that I possibly might have walked away from as myself, but because he was like, no, we have to, you know,
and you were told.
We have to do that. Yeah, so I was taught how to do those things. I was taught a bit of that as a kid because we did have animals and things did die and did need things, you know, but that was amazing to me. So then I started to really understand kangaroos more, and then you start to feel them, and then you really notice them. So when you're driving in the dark, you can literally feel they're there. So you're really cautious, you slow down, you don't charge through. So I started to learn how to really tune into nature on a much deeper level with him. And then so I'd take the birds off the road too, and I'd take a feather, or I'd take a few feathers, and I'd make things to honour that creature. So it was very much a spiritual practice for me, really, all the things that I made. You know, and then I started to think about colour, and I was doing a lot of things with making things, you know, to, you know, wear the colours that you need to wear, not just any old colour because it's in the fashion, like. So it all kind of came together in my art a bit as well. So then I started making clothes and silks and hand painting things and working with the colour a lot. And then that clothes label came out of that, really.
So you'd settled down in a particular spot at this stage?
Everything I ever did could be done on the move. Like, really basic.
So I would have thought for some of that you needed equipment and all that kind of
thing. I've always managed to make what I need out of something. Like Gus, if the car broke, he'd go walkabouts. He might come back a day later, but he'd have the piece of metal or a piece of something that would fix the U-bolt that broke or and I was sort of the same with, how can I get the wax out of this? Okay, I'll just heat a rock up on the fire and then I'll do it that way. So everything I needed, I just created really. And I've always done, I don't have much equipment. I mean, I do have a camera now and things like that, but, I remember my sister, because I used to sew everything by hand and make these incredible clothes that took weeks and then sell them for a pittance. And then I remember when I did go back to the UK and I'd stopped still for 5 minutes, I got a sewing machine and I made I think it was 3 jackets in one day. And I rang up my sister and I was just like, oh my God, I just made 3 jackets. And she's like, oh, hallelujah, my sister's discovered the Industrial Revolution 200 years late, Because I think, I took pride in just not needing anything. And if I'm going to make something, it needs to be made out of the things that are there. So I did a lot of the beads I used was all natural. Everything was natural. Bones or seeds or, feathers and things from birds. And so gradually that sort of evolved into a whole clothes label really that then I did run in the UK for a good few years.
So you and Gus...
No, me and Gus parted ways.
What happened?
What happened? We were always destitute. We had been living in a teepee for a good few years. I brought up my 2 littlies when we were in the teepee. So the teepee life was the nearest we could come to living on the ground in the cold climate. We came back from Australia full of all these plans and ideas because I wanted to see my family, and my mum had said, come back to Cornwall and you can, live at the farm and blah, blah, blah. And then none of that really worked out, and we ended up heading off to Scotland, and we had this plan to live in a croft. And then in the middle of this cyclone, by complete fluke, we ended up at Teepee Valley in Wales, which with all these incredible teepees all on this hillside in lashing rain and howling winds. And I was like, wow, I'd never seen anything like it. What's that? Where is that? And this farmer directed us how to get there. And then we were there for years, built a teepee, lived in a teepee, and that was like a good compromise, because you had the fire and you did have shelter, and we did have 2 little kids, so at that point it was... Yeah,
so it was more than
just
about the 2 of you at that point.
Too. I mean, if we'd stayed in Australia, we would have carried on living as we had, but I was pulled, I did get pulled back to the West for... Eventually. My family, and also I had a lot of healing around my family to do, I think one of the reasons I went to Australia was because it was as far away as I could get from them all,
Yeah.
So then you reach a certain age and you've got to come back and resolve stuff. So then I did get drawn back. He, on the other hand, just couldn't make the adjustment. He was cold the whole time. He was miserable and freezing. And even though we had a lovely life and we loved each other, so then he had this plan to go back to Australia and earn a wodge of money. And I was studying homeopathy, so I wanted to keep doing that. So then he went off, supposedly for a small amount of time, and met somebody else. Jumped ship, which always was just the biggest heartbreak for us, really. Never saw that coming in a million trillion years, that he would leave his kids
Yeah. But does he see them at all?
Oh, he does now. Yeah, he does. But he's in Broome in Australia, and we're here. Actually, Kunka is going. Midney lives in Australia. My eldest daughter, Kunka, and her partner have been there 9 years, and they've just come back here. So they've been back 1.5 years, and they've now got a little baby. So that's my first grandchild. So I'm hoping they stay here, but we're trying to find somewhere to create a homestead together. So we've been looking for land for a long time, trying to work out how to create that. But they're going back for a visit, so she'll go back up and see her dad then, yeah. So it's, it was very heartbreaking and took me a long, long time to get my equilibrium again. And then when I did...
Was it just that world that didn't suit him really, that he always belonged in that other place?
I think so, yeah. I mean, it's like trying to take, I didn't understand as much as I have all my Western side and my upbringing and my education and the things I wanted for my kids. I think education was part of it, He was one of the stolen children. They shoved him on a boat and sent him to Vietnam when he was 15. Like, his sisters were stolen off their mother and sent to Perth to be servants. It was hideous what happened to the Aboriginal people. Like, God. So, he had a lot of trauma from his childhood. And then when all my trauma came up about my childhood, he just couldn't deal. Yeah. So that was the point when he went away for a bit while I was supposedly dealing with all this stuff that had come up for me. And then just didn't come back.
Yeah. Do you still talk to him?
Walkabout. Yeah, absolutely. Apparently he never stops talking about me 30 years later. I think we still love each other very deeply. I think if you fall in love with someone, you never not love them, however hideous they are, whatever they do. I think you just...
Just those two worlds weren't compatible, really.
If I'd gone back there to live, that probably might have worked. But the white culture of Australia is just, I couldn't stand it for my children. I thought, I cannot bring my kids up as racist, sexist. The schooling, the whole white mentality, Aborigines are literally treated like dirt.
Yeah.
He wasn't even allowed in shops. His mother was not allowed in shops even.
Wow.
People think this all happened a long time ago, but it's just still happening right now, And I think, so I was kind of pulled back this way a bit, and then he tried to adjust. But he was as stubborn as a bloody mule too. Like, he wouldn't wear shoes. Like, who walks around in the snow with no shoes? Yeah. Even I had to resort to shoes. So gradually that broke, but I think also the fact that he met somebody else, he just flipped it and ended up with somebody else.
Yeah, well, maybe they made
and then they had children, so maybe,
yeah,
well, I think also she's Australian, it's all part of the same culture. He also inherited a portion of his mum's property, so that became his home. So, yeah, it's kind of life, isn't it, really?
Yeah. And when you were working out your stuff with him gone, and you have your kids, did acting and theatre play a part in that?
Yes. At the beginning, it was more the clothes label, and I was like working, I was trying to support us, I was a single mum with 2 little kids at this point, so I was trying to, well, actually not little, Midney was 7, I think, and Kunka was 5. So I was just working. I was sewing, printing, batiking, tie-dyeing, creating, packaging, selling, like I was doing all the big craft shows and festivals.
So you'd well and truly joined the real world.
So I well and truly joined the real world but on my terms in a way. Yeah. I think I've never, ever been able to do a job I didn't love. And I think that's been a source of criticism from my children, but also I think as they've got older, they've thought, well, that's,
It's called winning happy.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So I love what I do. I've always loved what I do. I've always prioritised my kids and their education. That was huge for me. And then when they were gone, other people's kids and their education, I never really looked at it like that. But as I look at it now, I think, that has really been my main passion, is that if people were educated differently, the world would be so different, and I feel like I'm chipping away at a very large rock, but chipping away nevertheless.
I hope you can join me on part 2 to hear about Sally's West Cork adventure, her daughter Iola, who is lighting up the big screen, and the Loft, the very special place for young people to express themselves in Schull. Thank you for listening to the Win Happy podcast, which has been brought to you by Fusion Communications. If you'd like to get in touch, feel free to send me an email at greg@fusion.ie. So until next time, take it easy.